This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am Steve Gould. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is episode number 62, if you can believe it. In this episode, we are interviewing 27-year veteran of the New York City Police Department, Bill Canon. Bill retired in 2011 as a detective sergeant, so there's absolutely no question in my mind that Bill's got some great stories, and I can't wait to get into it. The other thing about Bill that is really fun and is going to be interesting to talk about is he does stand-up comedy, and also he dabbles in acting a little bit, so I can't wait to hear about that. I think, I don't know, some of you know that I did stand-up comedy. I dabbled in stand-up comedy myself on the East Coast for about 5-6 years, and I think we even have some mutual friends, so that'll be interesting to see. So Bill is waiting on the other line. I got to dial him up. Before I do that, I want to say thank you to everybody for the continued support. Thank you for the donations. That's how the show is totally listener supported and funded at thingspolicesee.com. You can go there to donate, and you guys have been, and I really appreciate that. It basically goes into an account, and it basically just pays for like the Adobe editing software, the Libsyn charge to host the podcast, and it just enables us to do the podcast without paying for it. So it's really cool. There's a really cool community around the show, and we've really been enjoying the Facebook Live. So Saturdays at 5 p.m. typically we do a Cops in the News on our Facebook page, Things Police See, and I urge you to join us there. All right, without further ado, I'm going to dial up Bill Canon. Bill, you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Bill Canon, welcome to Things Police See, my man.
Wow, this is what an experience.
I'm happy to have you, brother. I was just doing your intro, and I was telling everybody, you know, we're gonna 27 years on NYPD. There's no doubt this guy's got some stories, but also you do stand-up comedy.
Yeah, I do. That's in fact the co-host of my show, Police Off the Cuff, is also a stand-up comic, and that's sort of how we found each other. We knew each other from the police department, but we reconnected doing stand-up comedy after we both retired. That's
really cool. And, you know, I researched you a little bit, as I do most of our guests, and I think we have some mutual friends, because I dabbled in stand-up comedy for 5 or 6 years on the East Coast, and I got to know Tom Delgado. You know him?
Yeah, we just had him on our show. I love that guy.
Yeah, he is great.
He's an amazing story, a funny guy, and a smart guy. You know?
Yeah, he was an attorney turned stand-up comic turned New York City tour guide, and I used to run.
All you have to know is that his father's a brain surgeon. That's all you need to know about if you got the smart gene.
Is he really? I didn't know that.
His father's a brain surgeon.
That's amazing. I don't. It doesn't surprise me at all. But I used to live on Cape Cod before I moved to the West Coast, and I had a little room on Cape Cod, a comedy room. I ran for 3 or 4 years, and I had twice during the summer. I had Tom, Joe Pera, Dan Licata come up all together, and put on a show. It was a lot of fun.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I sort of miss it because with COVID, we haven't really been getting up much unless we do a show that's outside, you know, and it's sort of tough. In the 6-7 months, we've been sort of quarantined. I only got up to about 2 or 3 times. You know, it sucks.
That's
lose
hard.
Your chops, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I came out here and I kept doing it for a while, and I got a chance to do some cool venues. And yeah, if you let like even a couple weeks go by, those nerves get even worse, you know, because you're like, you're just the way it is.
There's a rhythm to it, and there's also like key words that you remember to remember the bit. And if you're not doing it all the time,
right,
you lose the rhythm and you lose the memory of the key words that you need to interconnect the bit, and you know, and all the other stuff too, working off the crowd and all of that stuff. It's it's not good not to be able to get up and do it, you know.
Yeah, I don't know, for the listeners, if you don't know much, or if you're not a stand-up comedy nerd, outdoor comedy sucks. It's stand-up comedy outdoors is always challenging. Like when you get the call for a gig, and they're like, oh, it's it's at a golf tournament. You're like, oh, geez, this is going to suck.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's all.
It's like having all one type of crowd. Like, I'm going to do a comedy show for a church full of Mormons. You don't know if you're going to be able to make them laugh.
Absolutely. I just one of the last shows I did was for, Nitro Circus. They kind of do extreme sports.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
A friend of mine manages them, and I went to high school with him, and he called me and he said, "You still doing stand-up?" I said, "Yeah, I do it once in a while," and he's like, "Hey, we were going to have Steve-O open for this benefit in Huntington Beach, but he canceled." And I said, "Hey, my buddy does stand-up. I'll have him come." And I was like, whoa, okay. And I hadn't done stand-up in like 3 weeks, but I wasn't going to say no,
Right.
And so I get there. Everybody's hammered. It's a huge benefit for one of the Nitro Circus guys that died. And my buddy tells me, he goes, right up front there is his parents, and they're Mormons. And I go, oh, my goodness. I go, well, not all my jokes are the cleanest, and I can't clean them up on the spot. And he's like, no, it's fine. Just let it rip. I just want to let you know. I'm like, well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, I love that when someone right before the show says, "Oh, you got to be clean." You're like, "Whoa, I don't work clean." You told me this 2 weeks ago. I could have cleaned it up a little bit, but not the night of, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it just adds to the stress.
It's funny. I just did a show in Central Park 2 weeks ago with a comic named Mark Norman, who is fantastic.
I love Mark.
That guy is so good, man.
Yeah.
I felt like he was like the headliner, but I really was like, that's a really great comic. I mean, I've only been doing it for 6 years. So when I see these super pros, that guy was just, he knows how to write a joke,
He is killer. I actually had Joe List up to my room on Cape Cod. And Mark Norman, they do a podcast together, was supposed to come with him. And he called me and he goes, I was still on the job as a cop at the time. I was in the cruiser when he called me. And you know Mark's personality? He's like,
he's laid back.
Yeah, he's like, geez, I was so nervous to call you, and you're gonna kill me, Gould. You're gonna kill me. And I'm like, why? He goes, I got this college gig, and they have a contract, and I'm not gonna be able to make your show because they're gonna kill me if I don't go. And it was no big deal. Joe did the show, but both those guys are just beasts.
Yeah, excellent. It's I don't know if I can ever get that good, but I'll just get as good as I possibly can. But it's as if you don't, you got to keep working at it.
Yeah, it takes a really long time. Like I was just about 6 years in, and just feeling like when I was doing it regularly, feeling like I was doing better more than I was doing bad. I was feeling pretty good.
Right.
But it took a long, long time. People don't realize that it takes, your first year, all your material you basically throw out, and then you got to find out what works. But you did it right, Bill. I tried to do it while I was on the job raising my kids.
Yeah, that's tough to do.
No time. There's just no time.
Well, my partner, Mark DeMeo, he's been doing it for like 23 years.
Wow.
And but it really hurt his police career because he was trying to get out at 4:00 every day. And if you're active or you want to do anything in the police department, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But he was doing comedy at night. And as a result, he just did 20 years. And in fact, he had a show called 20 and Out. But I would imagine his pension sucks because he didn't do any overtime and he just did 20 years and got out. So, and now with no comedy, he's even crying the financial blues even more.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. He's gonna
no shows, nothing. So he's like, it's tough. I wouldn't want to count on comedy for money. Although, we just started, I don't know if you do Patreon for this show. We just started doing that like a month and a half ago. So we actually signed up like 28 people so far.
That's awesome. That's great. So you guys like Patreon?
Well, it beats the shit out of getting nothing for your work,
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we started doing was Mark started doing a one-on-one with Mark DeMeo. So he does it by himself. And I do a real crime show by myself. So I do like an episode like every 2 weeks. And that's just for our Patreon customers.
Oh,
and
wow.
So
cool.
far, I've gotten some really, really great detectives that have come on and told their stories. So, and next week I have this woman who's a medical legal investigator, and her name is Barbara Butcher. She didn't invent that name; she was born with it. For a medical legal investigator, and she's been to over 680 homicide scenes.
Holy cow!
Yeah, so she's going to be a great, great guest. And, in New York City, a medical legal investigator has to be a physician's assistant. That's the requirement. So they have a huge amount of education.
Yeah, I would say so. That's like right below a doctor.
Right, exactly. And, I spoke to the guy who has the podcast Coroner's Talk.
Oh, I've seen that on the list, yeah.
And he was like shocked when I told him that, because he's a coroner, but he doesn't have that level of education.
Yeah, how bad can you screw up? They're already dead, right?
Yeah, I used to say there's no reason to go lights and sirens to a homicide, because no matter what you do, you're not going to correct the situation when you get there,
Right, absolutely. All right, Bill, let's get into it, my man. I want to hear some of your stories from the Big Apple.
All right, cool.
Can you tell us about the first hot call you went to, and the first call that really got your blood pumping?
When I was a rookie cop, they used to call us, they put us in these units called neighborhood stabilization units. And we used to love working in the 2-3 precinct, which was El Barrio, or Spanish Harlem, And one of the first, the precinct was always rocking, and, shootings and robberies and stuff like that. And I was on a foot post, and I got a call of a past robbery. And myself and the adjoining foot post saw the guy fitting the description. So we stopped him, and we could tell even he was sweating profusely, and he was really nervous and stuff. So we just gave him a quick pat down, and I went over the radio. I said, Central, could you have the unit with the robbery complainant bring her by this location to do a show up? As soon as I said that, it was boom. He was off to the races, and we were like chasing this guy, and he didn't realize we just got out of the academy. So we could run, you know what I mean? Right. He was not gonna outrun us. So we caught him in this courtyard, and he started fighting with us. But what he started doing was he was swallowing crack. Ooh. And we didn't understand why he was doing that at the time, So for whatever reason, the woman that was robbed never got to the location to do a show up. So we cuffed him up, and we brought him into the precinct, and an accidental show up was done inside the station house, which really legally is not a good show up, because it says that in all the legal bureau bulletins, it's unreliable for there to be a show up inside a precinct station house.
Okay.
It's too suggestive. But since this was an accident, there was a possibility they would allow it. And of course, the woman that was robbed was like, that's the guy who just robbed me.
Right.
But make a long story short, he winds up in intensive care because he swallowed the crack, and he had vomited it up in the cell in the precinct. And how they always say, don't listen to all these hairbag cops. Do what's right. And luckily, I put on gloves, and I vouched the crack, and wrote in the story, the prisoner vomited up the crack in the cell. That saved our ass, because he claimed that we beat the shit out of him. And he filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against myself and my partner when we were rookies. And everyone was pointing at us, you guys are brutal. You guys beat the shit out of that guy. He wound up in intensive care, blah, 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 blah. And long story short, he got convicted, and we went home, and we went to court one time on it where his attorney was claiming that they were suing us for millions of dollars, and myself and my partner, Mike Murray, who is now the PBA attorney for the New York City PBA. And we were claiming they were going to sue us for millions of dollars. And the judge said, okay, then I don't want them to say anything if you're going to sue them. Anyway, the whole case was thrown out. And fast forward to 20-something years later, I meet that same attorney who had disparaged me in court. I was supervising a lineup in the 2-3 precinct. And I looked at him, I said, you look familiar to me. And he looks at me, and if you say that to any attorney, you could see the fear in their eyes, Yeah. And I said, and I mentioned the name of his client, and he turned white. I go, I was one of those cops that you said was the most brutal cop you had ever seen in your history of your law practice. And he started doing this tap dance. He couldn't get out of the 2-3 precinct fast enough.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a great story, great ending to it, you know.
Yeah, that is the most complete early hot call I've ever heard. That's great. That's geez, usually it takes a long, like I've seen that same thing where I used to work in Massachusetts where we had an attorney that was a ADA, worked for the DA, and he was great. He worked with us, good guy. Soon as he went private, he was a complete dick. He would, he would disparage you on the stand and really push the limits. And it was like, then he'd see you later and go, "Oh, hey, how's it going, Steve?" And you'd be like, "Screw you!" Like,
yeah, I know. I used to take it personal.
Yeah,
because I say, "Oh, this isn't personal." I took it personal, that they would do that. I really did, because I was like, "This is bullshit. I don't care that that's the game." I remember I was on the stand one time, and this legal aid attorney says, "Sergeant, I'd like to know a little bit about your disciplinary history."
Oh, jeez.
And so I looked at her. I said, I don't have one. And you know how they say, don't ever ask a question unless you know the answer?
Yeah.
She felt like an asshole because she didn't check if I had a disciplinary history. And I said, I really don't have one.
Yeah, she just figured New York cop, been on the job this long.
Yeah, right. He's got a rap sheet like as long as my clients,
That's excellent. Bill, can you describe a strange or bizarre thing you've dealt with?
Oh, my God. You got to remember, I was in homicide for almost 10 years. This was one of the most bizarre cases. We get a call to this apartment, and there's blood all over the place as if there was a murder in this location. And the fact pattern was that two rookie cops see these two guys carrying out this big duffel bag, and it's dripping blood. And they throw the duffel bag in the back of this SUV, and the cops are running, and the SUV takes off. Anyway, so we got a homicide scene, we believe, but no body. So in New York City, if you call the crime scene unit, which processes the crime scene, and you don't have a body, they're like, "We ain't coming. What do you got? You got blood. We ain't coming,
Yeah.
And really, they're so busy, you have to be like, all right. So I knew something bad happened, but what are we going to do? We have no body right now. And, we did, of course, an investigation on the location, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they find the body in the adjacent precinct, and the head is lying in a bag, and the body parts are all over the place.
Ooh.
So what had happened was this guy was brought to this location. It was on East 103rd Street in the 2-3 precinct, and he was tortured, and they actually cut his hands off. They cut his head off. They cut his face off. And you could see on his arms, there was cigarette burns in his arms because they were torturing him, this guy. And what happened was we found out he was sticking up drug locations in Brooklyn. So that's not really a profession that you go into where you're going to live very long at,
Yeah.
So the next day when we came in, we knew exactly what happened. Well, here's the crime scene. Here's the body. Now we could put them both together. And and we actually had the perp, and we had him in the box for like 24 hours. He wouldn't crack. And he went back to the country. Well, I forget which country they were from. Belize, I think it was. And he went back there, and this guy's family murdered him. So basically the case was closed. But we knew we had the right guy, but he wouldn't give it up,
Wow. Bill, this is when you were already working homicide for a while. And did it take you some time to get used to this kind of gore, or were you one of the guys that kind of immediately was never fazed by it?
No, when I first came on the police department, I was assigned to a relatively quiet precinct, the 20th precinct on the Upper West Side. But there was quality crime there. There was like, when you had a robbery, it was good complaining. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't know if people understand this when we say quality crime, because a lot of crime is between two criminals committing a crime against each other.
Right. They won't cooperate.
Right. And it's not the greatest thing. But on the Upper West Side, we had great complainants, and people would come into that neighborhood to rob people and to do burglaries and stuff like that because they felt like it was a soft touch type area. But then when I made sergeant really early in my career. I actually had 4 years, 10 months on the job, and I made sergeant. And then I worked the 24th precinct on the Upper West Side, and there was some violence there. We would get like 20, 24, 25 murders a year there.
Oh, wow.
But like in the 90s, the 3-4 had 129 murders that year, and it was all crack related. So, yeah, I mean, it bothered you to see this stuff, but you'd see stuff like, I remember this guy got shot on 108th Street, and this cop who was in my squad, he was also an EMT, and he rushes out and pulls all this shit out of his trunk, and he starts working on the guy. And I didn't say anything right there, and as he picks the guy up, a loaded 9 falls from the guy's underneath the guy. So when EMS took him away, I grabbed the cop. I said, Dave, I go, you know how fucking crazy it is that you just did that? I go, what if in his last breath he said, let me kill this little cop? You got to think like a cop, not an EMT. You're not an EMT when you're the police, you know?
Right, yeah.
That guy could have killed you. And, I'm just saying it's all mindset, and he was worrying about saving this guy. And this guy obviously wasn't a good guy. He was also a slow gunfighter,
Yeah, and they show us all those videos in Police Academy when that exact thing happens. You go to help the guy and he blasts you in the neck or something. You know?
Exactly. And, I was like, and here you are trying to help this guy who's obviously not a nice guy. He's got a loaded gun and he just got shot. Someone didn't like him.
Right. Oh, man. Yeah, I can remember when, I'm 40, so I remember the 80s and 90s as a kid. And I can remember it was like the aura surrounding New York City was like, if you go in there, you'll get killed. It was like, New York City's violent. The subway is violent. The parks are violent. It had a real bad rap for a while.
Well, it deserved it, and it's actually turning toward the bad again. Hopefully it'll never get back to what it was, but it's turning bad again. In New York City, back they had these units called RIP units, and it stood for Robbery Investigation Program. And when they started the RIP units, the criteria for getting a RIP unit in your precinct, which meant you would get a sergeant and 12 detectives just doing robberies.
Wow.
You had to have 100 robberies a month to qualify for a RIP unit.
Holy cow.
And now almost no precinct gets 100 robberies a month. Back then, so many precincts qualified. It was like ridiculous,
Wow. I think we have another mutual friend, Peter Pranzo.
Oh, great guy. We've had him on our show, Lieutenant Pete Pranzo.
Yeah,
the best.
He has some great stories from the 60s and 70s that were like, holy cow. But you guys could, I was excited to have another New Yorker. You guys, your accents rival each other,
Pete Pranzo, when I was in Citywide Anti-Crime, and he was a lieutenant there when I was there, it was 1988. And he was like a legend because he was a conditions lieutenant in the 3-2, which is Central Harlem. And that was the hub for heroin in New York City. But back then it was, I think, run by the Italian mob, like the Gambinos.
Right.
So they had put a contract out on Pranzo's life.
Yeah, he talked about it. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, so the interesting stuff, like who would think the Italian mob would be running the heroin in Harlem, But that's what happened. Yeah, I have his book. I read most of it. When you do this, people always send in your books, right? You don't have the chance to read every single one of them, right?
No, absolutely, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I have a few books right here. But Peter was a hell of a guy, and people loved him, and people love New York cop stories. It's just there's a certain grit to it.
Yeah, he's also like, he's believable. He's a gentleman. Like you wouldn't have, he could have been anything. You wouldn't have, like, you had to pick his profession by looking at him. You would never guess that he was a police lieutenant.
Right. Yeah. So, Bill, can you tell us your most intense or terrifying call?
Because I always had that mindset to be like a plainclothes guy, and a lot of the things that I got involved in were like pickup things. They weren't specifically over the radio. And this was actually on the Upper West Side, and I was a rookie cop, and I was walking around, and I was near 79th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, and I see all of these people running out of, which was then called Manufacturers Hanover Trust. I don't think that even exists anymore. I think it became Chase, but it was Manufacturers Hanover Trust Bank. So I run up to someone and I said, "What happened?" They go, "A guy just stuck up the bank at gunpoint."
Oh, wow.
And I go, "No shit." And I go, "Where did he go?" And they go, "He went that way." So I run up this street, up 79th Street.
It's like a movie.
I run up eastbound on 79th Street toward Columbus, And this lady's like, she has this terrified look on her face. I said, Miss, where'd the bank robber go? She goes, he's in there. You know, she's whispering. She goes, he's in there.
Oh man.
So I go into the building, and I see the guy changing his clothes by a freight elevator. So he's gonna like get into a different outfit than he was wearing when he stuck up the bank. So I yell to him, police, you know, don't move, the whole thing. Come out with your hands up. As he's walking toward me, the passenger elevator opens and two Upper West Siders get out of it. And I'm like, get the fuck back in the eye. They left something on the floor before they ran back into the elevator.
I bet.
You know? So he's walking toward me, and I'm putting him on the wall. And as I'm doing that, a uniformed cop says, drop the gun. And he's talking to me. And I'm like, dude, I'm on the job. I'm a police officer. He goes, drop your gun. I go, no, I'm not going to drop my gun. You know, as they train you, I go, my shield's in my left rear pocket. I'll take it out and I'll throw it back to you, but I'm not dropping my. I was more afraid of the perp that robbed the bank than of the uniformed cop shooting me. You know.
Sure. Oh, so that went over my head. So you were kind of just mingling foot patrol plainclothes.
No, I wasn't even working. I was off duty.
Oh,
I was just walking around the precinct. You know.
Got it.
So, but I look like a nerd. I had on these white pants, this really goofy looking shirt. I mean, you know, who do you think was the bank robber? You know, what's wrong with this picture?
Right.
Anyway, so I throw my shield back to him. He goes, don't, you know, he's screaming at me. He's from Manhattan traffic. He's like, don't turn around. I won't. And then a couple of cops from my precinct run in, and they say, that's Canon. And they put him on the wall. The guy's on the wall. They go back into the room, and he's got a loaded sawed-off M1 carbine.
Whoa.
Fully loaded, ready to go, and all the money from the bank. And that was my rookie. I was still a rookie, and I made that collar off duty. So that got me into plain clothes before I was even off probation.
Wow. So, good thing you had your piece on you.
Oh, yeah. And it was on my ankle, and I had the little 5-shot chief, you know?
Yeah, I know that's kind of a trend now. That a lot of cops, well, it's 50-50 maybe, but a lot of cops aren't carrying off duty. But it used to be like everybody did. I
always, you know, something, even to this day, if I go into the city, I carry my gun. I'm not, you know.
Yeah, I do too.
I get that, you know, that old adage, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. I live by that, you know.
Absolutely. Man,
I have my little baby Glock now, you know.
Yeah, I got one of those too. It's awesome.
It's a nice little gun. Yeah, you know, some of the truth is, it's only really like an inch shorter than the Glock 19.
Yeah, it's kind of like a blocky little thing.
Yeah, but it's a lot lighter because you're not carrying 16 rounds in it either.
Those Glocks are cool. It doesn't seem to matter how much they chop off the barrel. You can still be pretty accurate with them.
Well, you know, when it goes into single action mode, that's the thing. Even the baby Glock, I couldn't believe how easy the trigger pull was after you fire that first round. I went to the range with it. I was like, holy shit, this thing is really cocked, you know?
Yeah, those are striker fire. Those things are great.
Yeah.
So this event kind of helped you. I mean, it really should have. You were off duty. You stepped in and caught a bank robber. That's pretty awesome. That kind of went on your resume and helped you get what you wanted, plainclothes. Yeah, I wanted to go into plainclothes, but you know, my CO at the time became a famous cop. It was his name was Captain Anemone, and he became chief of the department Anemone years later. Wow. And he was a real street cop. So when he was so excited that I made that collar, he was like, all right, I'll put him in anti-crime. He goes, I don't, you know, he goes, I don't like to do this because he's got no damn time on the job. But the anti-crime sergeant was a really experienced guy. He said, I'll take him under my wing. And it was great because he taught me a lot of things. He was like an 11-year veteran of citywide anti-crime, street crime unit. So he taught me a lot. And that's, which I then passed on to people that I had taught, because I wound up working in anti-crime for 6.5 years, like 3.5 as a cop and 3 as a sergeant. And then I went into the robbery unit, you know, but that stuff isn't, you know, it's passed down by, you know, people that really care about the art of working in plain clothes. You know, I don't know if that art, well, now they disbanded anti-crime in New York City. I was just going to ask you that. Is that true? They're not going to have that at all? They disbanded it, and they have units that are working the same type of role that anti-crime filled, but in uniforms. But you're not as effective. No.
you know?
Yeah, because that gets a whole kind of mythology behind it. When people are getting busted by plain clothes guys, it's kind of like they don't know which angle you're coming from, where you are. That's kind of like part of the effectiveness of plain clothes guys, strike teams like that, you know?
Absolutely. You know, we would, on the Upper West Side, we could blend in, and we would actually set up on robbers. And they would go into the block, and we'd have the block covered at both ends. And when they hit, sometimes they'd run right to us. It's so amazing to see someone that just did a robbery and they're running toward you instead of you chasing them, you know, because they don't know the police are around, you know.
So how bad is it going to have to get for these guys, for the politicians in that city to realize this is a bad idea, do you think?
It's getting pretty bad right now, you know. It has to get to where the public starts screaming about it, you know. And we call, in New York City, we call it the Brian Watkins moment. And I don't know if you're familiar with that case, but
no.
There was a case in the 1990s. David Dinkins was the mayor, and a family from Utah came to New York City to go to watch the U.S. Open tennis tournament. And when they were going for the train in Times Square, a group of kids mugged Brian Watkins' mother. And he came to her defense, and he was stabbed to death.
Ooh.
And the city was outraged that this happened. Like this family from Utah comes to New York City to watch the U.S. Open, and the mother gets attacked and the son gets stabbed to death. There's something that has to be done.
Bad
and
press.
That was the moment. Yeah, that was the moment where the city basically said, "We've had enough of this. You know, do something about it."
Yeah, that's bad for tourism, man. If you come in and get murdered. I do see your, I feel bad for you guys too. I see your union president, or the benevolent spokesperson there. It kind of looks like Fonzarelli with the slick back hair.
Are you talking about Patty Burns?
Maybe that's who it is. Yeah, he just looks, he's got the slick back hair, and
yeah,
looks kind of like, I forget the guy that played.
Excuse me, Pat Lynch. Pat Burns was the former Pat Lynch. Yeah, he's been the union president for a long time now. Yeah, and I'm sure, I mean, I'm not sure, I don't know for a fact, but maybe he has political aspirations after he gets off the police department. Because I would imagine he's got to be in his early 60s, and you have to get off the job when you're 63. So he may be, because I see he's going out, giving a lot of speeches and getting involved in a lot of political. Well, the union is always political to begin with.
He spoke really well, and I just felt for you guys, all the New York coppers standing behind him, and basically people just took turns getting to the podium and going, "We're not bad. Cops aren't bad. We're not Minneapolis. We're New York. Like, stop. Like, what do you like?" It's like watching, it's like telling a drunk a bunch of times, they're about to do something real stupid, but they just won't listen, and they're going to do it anyways. It reminded me of that, them just trying to plead with everybody, like, not to go down this road. But then, 2 months later, this country's still burning and everybody's still, quote, defunding the police. So,
well, this has been a national movement. We started our podcast February 2019. And we were talking about it then, that there's a national movement against the police. And there was, even then. I mean, you saw the New York police officer had that bucket of water poured over him.
Yep.
It was horrendous. I mean, as a profession, your heart was tore apart, even if you weren't a New York City cop. If you were, Massachusetts, if you were New Jersey, if you were California, that tore your heart apart. Like, how can that happen? How can they let that happen? You know? And then these people that talk about defunding, they were just out of their mind. As a normal citizen, I want the police. I want the police there to protect my family. I want the police there to respond if something happens to me or one of my family members. Defunding, where does that come from? It's just asinine,
Anytime they take a camera into the bad neighborhoods, you don't hear that. You hear the people saying, "Defund the police. We need more police. My brother got killed. All my brothers got killed."
Right.
In gang violence. That's not reality. So it's just, holy cow, it's so frustrating. We just talked about on the podcast how Minneapolis, now their city chairman and their city council is saying, like, well, what's going on with all this crime? Why are all the police officers leaving? Like, this makes no sense. They're not doing their job.
Oh God!
It's like, what are you, out of your mind? You said you wanted to abolish them. Forget about defunding. You wanted violence interrupters to come. Who are they?
Yeah, I love that one.
What the hell are you talking about?
They're going to become victims of violence interrupters.
Yeah, I just picture someone in a cardigan with a clipboard, like, excuse me, please don't do that.
Stop.
Oh, now you're attacking me. It's ridiculous, man.
Well, in New York City, it went one level worse than that. The city council drew up this thing called the diaphragm law. And that's where when the police make an arrest, and the way it's worded is if they put their knee in the perpetrator's back, they can be arrested for a misdemeanor.
Whoa.
It's actually written like that. So that's why a lot of, the police were terrified to make an arrest. Well, look, am I going to be subject to arrest if I put that's textbook how you
subdue someone, yeah.
Subdue someone is to put your knee in the person's back. And you don't keep it there forever. Once he's cuffed, you take it off. But that is textbook how it's done. And these people in the city council, did they bother asking anyone? Is this feasible to do this? Did they ask any police experts? Did they ask any lawyers? Did they ask any, criminal justice doctors? No, they didn't. They're so arrogant that they think they know what they're talking about when they don't. And now there's a lawsuit. And I hope the lawsuit totally overturns it, because I wouldn't let them overturn it. They don't deserve to overturn it because they're such morons to have made this law in the first place. They need a court to say, you people are idiots, Yeah. And this is not going to stand, It
reminds me of the congressman standing there at the podium and saying, we need to ban these AR-14s. Doesn't even know what the gun is, It's like,
and they always call them assault weapons, and and fully automatic. They don't know what they're talking about,
Nope.
It's really scary because when they talk about I'm not a huge gun buff. I have the guns I retired with, and that's it. But I'm happy that I do have them, because when you see what's happened in this country, and that the politicians are not willing to protect the citizenry, it's very scary. And you better get a damn gun to protect your family,
Yeah. When we're seeing that's exactly the reaction they're getting. You can't buy ammo anywhere. There's no guns available. Everybody in America was like, well, if I don't own a gun, I'm getting one, because these bastards might get rid of the police.
The guns are up. Those gun sales are up like 300-something%, And
it's so annoying.
It is crazy. And then they're talking about, as you said, you can't get ammo. Are they going to make the license cost so much that people will give up the license to own a gun? I won't, but that's another way they're going to try to dissuade you from having a legal gun. Yeah,
I say it's annoying because out here in California, I've been in a few gun stores. When I was out driving around, I pulled in just to say, always want to go in here. There's no ammo and there's no guns in the stores. They're just empty. I'm like, what do you do here? And the guy's like, well, I can order you. I want a specific kind of 9mm that I always carried on the job. And he goes, oh yeah, we can get that. He goes 12, 18 weeks, 6 months, but we can order it. I'm like, you want me to put money down and you you can't tell me when it's going to get here? It's like,
it's unbelievable. In New York City, not New York City, New York State, Cuomo, who's another anti-gun moron, he made something called the SAFE Act. So even retired police, they limited the amount of rounds you could carry in your weapon. It's so, and then that you couldn't carry your weapon on a school or a college campus. Isn't that the exact person you want to have a legal gun on a college campus or a high school, or someone that could defend, against an active shooter? It's unbelievable what they've done.
Yeah, you're exactly right. They're, my dad took my mom to New York City a couple of years ago, and they were really cool there. I've heard stories where you can get in a bind with New York City with Leosa and stuff. If they don't know you, they might take your gun and make you go to court. But my dad, they're going to see the Statue of Liberty, and I guess like the Department of Homeland Security or something runs the security, but the New York cops are there also.
Okay.
And
it's possible. I've never been, like anyone that lives in New York, I've never been to the Statue of Liberty.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You don't go when you live there. But he kind of said there was these they're kind of like TSA-ish guards. And my dad had a pocket knife and something else, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got to take this from you," and blah blah blah. And he also had his retired. My dad was a cop for 30 years. He had his retirement tin, and the cop or somebody noticed it and was stepped in and was like, "Hey, this guy's fine. Leave him alone." And totally stepped over the federal guys and was like, "Just collect your stuff, sir. You're all set." And my dad really appreciated that, because you start to feel like, I did 30 years as he retired as a lieutenant. I am qualified to have these things. It's not a big deal, and they embarrass you. They're going to confiscate them from you in line.
Yeah, it's give the man a little courtesy and a little respect for who he is and what he's done.
Exactly.
It's like who gives zero courtesy is TSA.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll stop you and say, "Oh, we're choosing you for special search," and I go, "Dude, I'm retired law. Oh, we don't care. Because you're an asshole. That's why you don't care. That's why you're doing this job,
Well, they're trying to be cops, probably.
Yeah. I'd love to see them pulled over and say, "I'm on the job, dude. Believe me, you have a job," as they say. You're not on the job,
No, what's funny? You're the perfect person to ask. I used to work as a natural resource officer earlier in my law enforcement career, and was like a game warden. And one of the guys I worked with, older gentleman, he used to work part-time, ran a patrol boat on the river for us. And he had a coin that said, it was NYPD. It said anytime, anything, anytime, anywhere, anything, or something like that. It was like a big old coin. And he told me this was given to me by my dad, and his friend was a New York City cop. And back in the day, you could throw that coin down if you're caught doing something, and they take the coin and you'd walk. Is that an old school? Is that like some kind of urban?
That's the motto of the emergency service unit. The emergency service unit has like a picture of a rabbit on their truck with a gun belt on, with the gun, and he's blowing into it, and he says, "Anytime, baby."
Got
and
it.
that's the motto of emergency service.
So you don't know of any coin like that that'll get you out of anything?
Well, there's so many challenge coins out now. I don't know when that would have been made, but I mean, it seems every unit these days is producing a challenge coin,
Yeah.
It used to be cops used to have like precinct shirts, and then it would say 105 precinct scale busters and stuff like that. But they got so graphic that the police commissioner had to say, "No more of those shirts,"
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Give them an inch, they'll take a mile.
Right. Or whatever the name of the precinct was, the Alamo, the this, the that, they would have that on the show Manhattan North Homicide used to have a shirt that said, "Our day begins when yours ends," And they didn't like that either,
Yeah, good. My good friend of mine and who co-hosts the podcast with me for Police in the News is Ken Roybal. He's retired LAPD, and one of his first places he worked was Shootin' Newton in LA, and it's a skull with 2 6-shooters, says Lucky 13 underneath, in like a cowboy hat. And they all used to have the tattoo and everything, and they got rid of all that stuff that talked about gunfighting and killing people. And
right, that's great for the camaraderie of the police, but the community hates it.
Yeah, yeah. And you can, a lot. And to be honest, a lot of them do look like like something a biker you'd see on a biker.
Right, exactly.
Going to scare the old people.
I remember we used to have like one of those air freshener skull and crossbones on the in the unmarked card, and I remember some woman said, "Why do you have that? That's so scary." It's an air freshener, ma'am.
Yeah, I have tattoos on my right arm, and I used to feel bad sometimes. You pull an older woman over or something, and they see the tattoo or something, and they automatically think like lower class or criminal. They're like, "Ooh,
right.
This guy kill a cop and put his uniform on."
Well, they used to have to. The state police won't let anyone come on that has like the tattoo sleeves on their arms, or if they do, they have to wear the long sleeve shirts. They won't let them be exposed. Yeah,
I had to start wearing one of those skin colored like spandex sleeves to block it. They trying to change the rules on me. But like most tattoos, I could do without 2/3 of these tattoos, but I got them already. So what can I do? It's too late, man.
You weren't in the Marine Corps, were you?
No.
Okay.
No.
Those guys always get that bulldog with the spiked collar and,
Yeah. I know a cop who he was in line to get on the job, and this place he was going for said, we don't allow tattoos, period, and we have no policy for covering them. So by the time we hire you and the time you get out of academy, this thing needs to be, they gave him a certain amount of time. He had it skin grafted off, the globe and anchor.
Oh, God.
Skin grafted off his forearm, and he actually buried it like a person.
Oh, my God.
But he has this horrific, the whole inside of his forearm looks like a burn victim.
Oh.
And I said, this same station ended up changing their policy 2 years later. I said, dude, that's screwed up.
You can't get the tattoo back.
That's screwed up. Yeah. All right, Bill, can you tell us, dare I say, a positive or heartwarming situation from patrolling the streets and NYC, I should say?
When I see that, one of the things I always think of was the good feelings toward the police after 9/11. And it was like we would be going down there and crowds would be cheering us. We'd be leaving there and crowds would be cheering us. People heard you were a cop, they would come up to you and thank you. And that was the only time during my police career that we had that real warm feeling with the community where they really praised the police for doing their job. Because, that old adage that when the public runs away, the police run toward danger. And it's true, And there was no bigger event that proved that than 9/11 was, everyone was running away. The police and the fire department were running toward it, and that's why so many of them lost their lives that day,
Yeah, that is actually a textbook example of it. And yeah, you're right. That was a moment that brought everyone together and really, really, geez, it's so polarized now. It's like when you think back to that time that wasn't that long ago, that's such a shame to think. It's like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, exactly. What happened? What changed? What changed so much? What changed so much, even politically, that, politicians feel emboldened to criticize the police the way they do? It's just, it's got to be organized, because there's no way you can blame all of society's ills on the police. There's just no way. I think that maybe the politicians are afraid that it's going to come back on them. So let's blame someone first before they discover it's us,
Yeah. And I find, I'm not to get too political, but I don't even think the pro-police politicians go far enough supporting the police. It's like they're acting like the police have done something wrong. You know what I mean? That's kind of the stance they take. Like, but they're good guys, but we're going to reform them. It's like, no, can someone, because they don't think that. Most of them don't think that, but they're just.
No, they don't. It's just a popular thing. I always said that if you look at government in almost any city, the most competent area of government is the police department.
It certainly gets the most training.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you look at some of the other departments, you're like, oh my God, how about the Department of Education? Half of them belong in prison, It's like,
they're halfway to blame for the country's problems.
Yeah, most of Antifa, they're all teachers,
Yeah, exactly.
3/4 of them, what's your profession? I'm a teacher. Oh, you're teaching our kids? Unbelievable. And then other areas of government too, they're just as bad. The police department is the most competent area of government, hands down.
Yeah, they just take it on the nose with everything. They kind of tell you that when you're getting into it. They're like, no one's going to pat you in the back. No one's going to thank you. Everybody's going to, kick you in the head, like this is the kind of job it is. But it's never been like this. This is to the nth degree.
Well, I could see people that when they come on now, they tell you like when you're in the academy, I don't think you're going to be a crime fighter. That's really what I wanted to do. And that's what my whole career was about, was, being in the mix, being, anti-crime, robbery unit, precinct detective squad, homicide. That's what I wanted to do. That was what interested me and what drew me to the job. But I could see people coming on the job now, just maybe using it for the 20 years for the pension and the health benefits and, getting a law degree while you're on the job. Some people do that.
Yeah.
Some people have the job figured out day one. Oh, I'm going to get a law degree, and when I have my 20, I'm out, and I'm going to be,
Sure.
you've seen those people. They figured it out day one.
Yeah. There's definitely the cop's cop, and then there's the people just kind of treat it like a job, not really a career. They're gonna use it for some kind of stepping stone,
Yeah, and sometimes you look at those people and you sort of say, maybe that guy wasn't wrong, or the guy who stays in the police academy and hits 3 tests in a row, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and now he's a police executive, as they say,
Right.
And he never got his hands dirty. I mean, he's not respected as a street cop, but he's still getting paid more than that cop humping the radio,
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was a big frustration when I worked for LAPD backgrounds for 2 years. And I got the opportunity to work with some really stellar cops. And some of these guys were, some of these retired homicide guys I worked alongside were legends in the city, solving quadruple homicides and just real cops. Like you said, they got the job and they wanted to mix it up. They wanted to get out there. They wanted to go into South LA and, get some bad guys. And
Right.
they would always voice their frustration at like the lunch table and say, they're handcuffing our cops. When they get a young recruit that wants, or 2 of them paired up that have running a trouble car in South LA or something, they want to get into it and break up some gangsters. They don't like it. They don't want them forcing confrontations and going after bad guys. That's not what they want. They don't want crime fighting like that in LA. That's not what Garcetti wants anyways,
It's it's really disturbing because there's Cuomo hired this attorney general. Her name is Letitia James, and she doesn't want cops to do car stops. Yeah, can you imagine that? Because they feel like everything, they're going to say, oh, it's racially biased. But some of the biggest crimes are discovered through a car stop.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
A stick-up team or a robbery team or, someone just kidnaps someone. Through a car stop is how the investigation starts lots of times. And how some, attorney general that doesn't know her ass from her elbow is going to across the board say, oh, we don't want car stops anymore. I think that, the police executives and the politicians that are pro-law enforcement have to fight that shit. I mean, that is horrendous,
Yeah, it's bad. You're right. You're essentially abolishing the police when you do stuff like that. I mean, they're going to be around, but what are they going to do?
Yeah, and just the fact that they even do like quotas on cops, like what was the race of the person you pulled over, and if it's too much of one race, they're going to look to discipline you as saying you're what's that term they use? Implicit bias.
Yeah.
What if you work in a precinct that's all one race? How are you going to help but you're pulling over people that just break the law? You're not pulling them over by race because everyone is of that race. So what are you supposed to do? Say, oh, every 4th person I'm going to let go because I don't want, be accused. But still, you're still pulling over 100% of that race because that's all that lives in the precinct that you work.
Yeah, these studies are all, they just come out just how they want them to, like if you do a study in South LA and East LA, you're going to get Hispanics and blacks. And guess what? Guess the one thing they leave out of these studies is the race of the officer. Right, well, the officers are all Hispanic and a lot of them are black too. So is that racism? But no, they don't want to talk about that statistic. They leave that out. So everybody mentally fills in some white hard ass picking on people in the inner city. That's just where their
let's
brain
grab
goes.
this guy and drag him across the precinct boundaries,
Right. Yeah. It's like
bad Bart from the suburbs. Bring him into the city,
Right.
It's even disturbing with new technologies. They're already claiming that facial recognition is biased. I mean, how could that be? There's another thing called where they predict crime based on historical events, which every good cop really does. Every day when I came in, when I was plain clothes, I would read the complaint reports and see where the robberies were occurring, who we were looking for. That's good police work. That's not bias.
You're biased against all these criminals.
Yeah, exactly. I'm biased against people who are committing crimes. Even all the new tools they're getting. These DNA, the familial DNA, and the DNA that's caught people, the serial killer who just caught in California from like 30 years ago, Ancestry.com. You know, they're trying to make these laws that are going to say, oh, you don't have permission to use that DNA because the people that signed up for this didn't agree to, you know, I mean, it's crazy. It's like they're taking the tools away from law enforcement before they even have them, really. Look, the Boston Marathon bomber, they were identified through facial recognition, comparing it against social networking sites.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Imagine they weren't caught in an expeditious manner. You know where they were heading? They were heading to Times Square.
Yeah.
You know? So take the tools. You know, as an investigator, the toughest thing in any kind of investigation, a robbery, a burglary, a murder, is getting the person identified. It's the toughest thing. And that's where you're always, you know, pulling your hair out. Shit, who is this guy? You know? And if they take those tools away from you, how are you going to solve anything? You know, it's, as I told you know, getting someone identified is the key to making the arrest and to prosecuting them. And if they take these tools away, you know, good luck with any of these investigations.
Yeah, they're trying, man. I mean, if you, I looked up that critical race theory. I have no idea what it was. I know that they stopped teaching it to the FBI and other federal agents, you know. That stuff is exactly what you're saying. They're trying to work it from the inside. That stuff's crazy, man. Critical race theory, one of their bullet points is the white nuclear family, mom, dad, 2 kids, is inherently white nationalism, is racist.
Yeah.
It just is. And objective truth is there's no truth unless it's like that person's truth. Which is crazy communist stuff. When that's what communism is.
It's you know something. This shit has to be stopped because it's really is nuts.
It's insane, and they treated Trump there like he stopped racial sensitivity training. No, this is critical race theory. This is some wacky wombat stuff. This isn't sensitivity training. This is like this stuff's racist. So it's pervasive, and it's really intertwined into our society. And yikes, man, you probably retired
crazy.
At a good time.
Well, you know, I used to teach. I taught college for 10 and a half years, and I was teaching part-time while I was working, and then I taught for 5 years full-time. And even reading the textbooks were written by these liberals. And I was like, I remember there was a corrections textbook, and the topic was career criminals. And the book said, career criminals are just like any other people, except their job is crime. And I was like, who the hell wrote this? Does this person real? And this is what I'm supposed to teach to these students? There was no way I was teaching that. That was total bullshit.
Sounds like the criminal's mom wrote it.
Yeah, I was just like, how? And they also said, and why, if you have 3 jobs, is that really a career? So why, if you commit 3 violent felonies, is that a persistent violent felon? This is some of the shit that was in this book.
Wow.
And I was just like, you know something? I'm teaching the gospel according to canon. What I learned in my police career. I am not teaching the crap in this book. What nonsense, you know? And the corrections book almost glorified prison inmates. Yeah, let's look up to these guys.
Wow.
That have you know, and that's really what it was, and that's what they're trying to do with the police departments. You like when they hire these, like they did it in was it Portland? The guys are like a reformed murderer. They're paying them like $150,000 a year as a consultant, like a gang consultant. You know, it's unbelievable. Who are making these decisions? You know.
Oh man, madness. Yeah, we had
sadness, you know.
I took a couple criminal justice classes in college, and they were my favorite. We had like a retired trooper for one, and he taught us good stuff, like, you know, fruit of the poisonous tree and just basic investigative stuff. But he would just tell us war stories, you know, and we're like, yeah, tell us that. That's awesome. That's unbelievable. He tried to start his lesson, but then he would inevitably, well, this reminds me of the time this happened. You know, I flipped my car and whatever. And, oh man, cops make good professors, man.
That's why, my classes were really popular because kids knew I was a homicide sergeant. They knew they were going to get some real stuff. Every semester I would set up a homicide crime scene, and it was like they would go in and investigate. I had like dummies playing the dead people and ballistic evidence and blood spatter, and so I set it up as best I could. But they loved it. That was the part of the course that they were like, "Oh my God, the crime scene! This is the coup de grace, the end of the semester crime scene."
Hell yeah, hands-on stuff, man. That's what they need.
So it was fun, but you can't, the expression "it is what it is." It is, and you can't change it. The people that commit the crime, no one's forcing them to commit crime. But they got to pay the piper once they do.
Yeah, the way to control the way to make crimes go away isn't to get rid of the law. It's to stop criminals from breaking them.
There's a professor from John Jay College. She's a former Israeli police lieutenant. Her name is Maki Haberfeld.
Oh, cool.
And she said the greatest thing, and it was this. It's so simple, but it makes so much sense. She goes, the best, and this is how she talks. She goes, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
Yeah.
Like, how simple, but how true, Of course that's the truth. Yes, hello.
Oh yeah, well you're hurting people's feelings over here, lady.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And whenever John Jay, it just turns so ridiculously liberal, whenever they have like a symposium on policing, of course she doesn't get invited because she's conservative. They want all leftists,
Yep.
That with the fresh lefty ideas, like it really kills me because you have to have a disparity of thought, not all one group of people that are pushing, police reform. There's some parts of policing need reform, yes, but overall, policing is a profession and it's done pretty damn well across the nation. And are some police departments weaker than others? Yes. Is their training weaker than others? Training costs money, and training takes cops off the road. So no one wants to spend the money, and no one wants to take the cops off the road. So it's sort of a catch-22,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you look at the big picture, if you look at America policing and how effective it is and how few officers, I think it's like under 1% of the police force is ever convicted or found guilty of the thing they did, the policy they broke or the law they broke. Like it's so small. It's incredibly small, smaller than any profession. It's tiny. Right. If you really look at it, it's like you said, doing a bang up job. But of course, that can be manipulated and painted into different pictures. But the cops really are doing a good job, always have. And it's got to be tough in New York City, man. I have buddies that live there that are more conservative minded, and they're in business. And they said they literally cannot, they like hide it. They can't talk about it with like in the community because that will be it. They could lose their job.
Yeah, well, that's the scary thing about politics these days is that you can't even say you support a certain group or certain side without being, disparaged, or people lose their jobs over saying they support a particular candidate. How did that happen?
I know. Yeah, I got buddies in the entertainment industry making good money, and he's like one of my best friends. He's like, oh, I don't say a damn thing. He goes, it's killing me. He's like, it's literally killing. It's like eating my soul. Like, I feel like I need to leave this job. Yeah.
Because that's not what America's about. The land of the free, the home of the brave, and people have died to protect people's right to freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, all this stuff. But it seems like it's being stepped on all the time, and rights are just being trampled on.
You know what? These people need to toughen up, Bill. And I think if you could hook them up with a ride along in Harlem, we might solve some problems. Well,
it's funny. Our last episode, actually, with Tom Delgado, was a real smart guy, but he's a liberal. And it was either him or the guest before wrote a book called My Father's Gun. It was the New York Times bestseller like 20 years ago. Anyway, I said to him, I go, the worst group of people ever to be born in this country are these millennials. What they need is 4 years in the Marine Corps before they're even allowed to open their mouth.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm sure I have two millennials. My one son's 28, my other's 26, but they're not like the typical millennial.
No, there's plenty of good millennials out there for sure. It's just,
Yeah.
who can blame them with the society we're raising them in, right? Bill, can you tell us, this is like a very popular question with the listeners. Got a lot of young listeners who are training or in police academy. Can you give them some advice from your career to kind of guide them along?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I think right now is probably one of the toughest times in the history of this country to go into law enforcement. But if you do, you have to be smart. And one of the things that people told me when I went through the academy is, and you'll find this out too, is keep your mouth shut. Be a listener when you first go through the academy. Don't have a big mouth, because you may talk about a guy you don't like, and in the 3 rows away is his cousin or his brother. Everyone on the police department's related in some way.
Right.
Some cop his dad's the chief, so keep your mouth shut. I mean, that old expression that you learned as a kid, loose lips sink ships, that is so true. Did I follow that? No, but I would advise people to follow it, And, look, always stay in shape. You see these cops that get obese, that fat. This is not a job to get fat and get out of shape, because you may need to be in shape for it to save your own life, And if you're not in shape and you can't fight, and you fight some 16 or 18-year-old who's, you may think, oh, I'll kill the 16-year-old. No, some of these kids are, weightlifting in the gym all day and they're strong as hell. Right. And you better, that's one thing, you stay in shape and learn the law, know the law, knowledge is power. And especially, some defense attorney or some district attorney wants to question you on whether what you did was legally okay. And you got to know the law to defend yourself, because, you could wind up with handcuffs on if you do the wrong thing. And, they'll always tell you in the academy, learn how to articulate, learn how to tell the story of what you did and defend your actions. And unfortunately, these days, you can be right and still get in trouble,
Absolutely.
I mean, the Breonna Taylor case, to me, is unbelievable. The boyfriend shot and hit the sergeant. He returns fire. She gets killed, and they're looking to indict these cops. I just cannot understand that whole case.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's a weird narrative they put forward where they're like, she's completely innocent of everything. She was lying in bed asleep. None of that is true. She's not innocent. She was dabbling in a bad world. And when you play with fire, sometimes
she was more than dabbling. They had like 41 pages of evidence against her.
Yeah, she rented a car for the guy once, and someone ended up dead in it. She holds money and drugs for him. It's like, yeah, she was in it. So, she
was in the game. Yeah, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, as they say.
That's the saying of the year, Bill. Absolutely.
It's I just, when people ask me about that case and they're so like resolute that the police were wrong, I'm just like, there's a thing called, the law, there's a thing called justification. If someone uses deadly physical force against you, you can use it back. You know what I mean? And if someone dies as a result of that, that's bad. But it's not a crime.
Right.
Murder is intend death, cause death, and in under certain other circumstances. And the other cop, he's being charged really what in New York City would be known as reckless, that he fired his gun through the window into another apartment.
Yeah, that sounds weird, that whole part of it. It's like, what was that guy doing?
When crazy shit happens, crazy reactions happen.
Absolutely.
So to hold them I cannot believe some of these politicians and some of these left-wing groups talking about indicting the cops for this. It's called justification. Know the law, read the law, and then tell me about that they should be arrested for. And then, they also kowtow to the mob by releasing the grand jury minutes. Grand jury minutes is supposed to be secret.
Yeah, that was weird.
But they released them because what are you doing? Pretty soon we're going to have no laws.
It's
Because
like
if the
it's
law
like
means
bending the
nothing-
knee. You know, you got to bend the knee to them.
Yeah. It's just we're in a bad place right now.
It's brutal, Bill. I mean, even when you try to find out, like, say you're proactive and you want to know what happened, if you start Googling the Breonna Taylor thing, you got to go through 15 articles, liberal articles, before you get to a level-headed one that has facts. It's insane. So the average person just using Google is going, "Hey, I looked it up. Look at all this crap." It's like, no, you gotta want it. You gotta want to find the truth.
You gotta find the grand jury minutes. You gotta find the legal documents, because journalists these days, it's a clown profession.
It is.
They don't seek the truth. They just seek the sensationalism.
No integrity.
I mean, there was recently an article in the New York Times, and I'll bring this up because it was about the Gilgo Beach serial killer. And a new chief of police has been hired out there, who's a former FBI person. And if you read the headline of this article, it sounded like she had solved the case. And I read it into it, and I wrote, who the hell wrote this article? They're not any closer to solving this case as they were 10 years ago. So where did this New York Times writer? I mean, it was so deceptive what he wrote. And I answered back and I said, this is the most ridiculously false article I've ever read in my life, But that's what we're up against, journalists that, to me, the New York Times, any article I read sounds like an op-ed.
Oh, yeah. All opinion pieces for sure.
Yeah. And when I tell my liberal friends, you're just reading it from a right-wing person. No, I said, look, here's an opinion. Here's an opinion. Here's an opinion. Here's an opinion. It's not supposed to be an opinion. It's supposed to be fact, Yep,
and they rarely recant or make a correction.
Oh, no. It's just like Dan Rather. He's 88 years old now. He's interviewing rock stars and stuff. God bless him, he still has a job. But he's a big-time liberal. And I always write on Twitter, didn't you get fired from CBS for lying?
That's funny. That's awesome. So, Detective Sergeant Bill Canon, 27 years, NYPD. Thank you so much for coming on the show, brother.
It was a pleasure, and it's always great to be on someone else's podcast, because sometimes I get tired of my partner.
Absolutely, and editing and all that stuff.
Yeah, even though he's funny, he's a funny guy and stuff, but it's nice to. Now you're in California, right?
Yes. And
now, does this podcast go out nationally? Are you on radio stations? How's that work?
Yeah, it just goes out. We'll go out on Monday. It goes out to all the platforms, iTunes and Spotify and iHeartRadio and all the apps. And then I also put it on the I'll put it on the Facebook page and the website as well.
No, that's great. Yeah, I try to do that too. It gets to be a lot of work sharing these podcasts all over the place.
I know. Never ending. Hey, where can the people find you, and where can they find your podcast at?
If you go on anchor.fm/OTC Pod 1, we're on like 10 different listening. We're on same thing, Spotify, Google, Public Radio, Stitcher. We're on all of the listening ones.
Okay.
And we also stream on Facebook Live. We're on YouTube because we do a video portion, but since the COVID thing, we haven't been going into the studio. We've been doing Monday and Thursday nights on Zoom and just putting it out there as it is live, with the mistakes in it and everything, because we can't really go into a studio right now, so we've been doing these live Facebook Live ones. And to tell you the truth, the Zoom has been pretty good. I mean, it's not as technically savvy as your podcast or, when you edit it and stuff like that. But it's cheap. It's free.
Absolutely. We do a live show once a week, and I love it because it just goes up. And if we screwed up, oh well, it's on there. That's why I do the podcast like a live radio show. I just call you, boom. We've never talked before, and we just start talking because that's the best way for me to get it done.
Something, isn't it amazing that we've already spoke for an hour and 12 minutes, and we could keep talking probably for 2 hours, but it's amazing. We never met before, but because we have a commonality, and we have, we're both in law enforcement. We both like comedy. You could basically talk forever,
Oh yeah, Bill, I could interview you for 10 more hours, I'm sure. And if you're up to it, have you come back on the show,
There's a guy and I was going to ask you if you could put him on your show. His name is Christopher Strom, and he's a retired NYPD sergeant, but he wrote a book called Brooklyn to Baghdad.
Okay.
And he has a really, really interesting story. And I had him on my show, and he's been on Jay Wiley. You know Jay Wiley, right?
No.
Law Enforcement Today. He has a national radio show.
Oh, okay.
He's been on Randy Sutton's show. Anyway, if you wanted to, it was an interesting show because he was an investigator in Baghdad for IEDs.
Wow, I'd love to have him. Sounds great.
Yeah, so I'll have him give you a call. And he'd be a great guest for you, and great guy. And this was great for me. I just it's good to sometimes be the subject of the interview rather than the interviewer.
Absolutely, yeah. This was a blast, Bill, and I really appreciate it. So is it off the cuff podcast or police off the cuff?
It's police off the cuff. We had to add police in there because there was so many podcasts that were called off the cuff.
Okay.
So we had to differentiate ourselves, so we put police in front of it, police off the cuff podcast.
And the Facebook page is the same name?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I will link, for everybody listening, I will link that in the show notes. You can click there. I urge you to go over there and check out Bill's show that he co-hosts. It's really fun. I watched one of them with you had the Irishman on there. You guys are doing the Zoom. So I think my audience will like that. And, there's not all that many law enforcement podcasts out there. We got to stick together,
Steve, another thing, if you wanted to, and I'm not sure you would, but you could ask them. Law Enforcement Today was looking for podcasts, and you can just load it onto there, and you sort of get part of their audience through just putting your podcast on there. And the guy who you reach out to is Jay Wiley.
Okay, you know what? They sent me an email about that, but I didn't. You get emails like that a lot, and you're like, I didn't know if there was an angle to it, or did they want a piece of my show?
It's actually free, so you could post you're getting their audience for you, so it's a win-win for you.
Oh, okay. Well, if I got your recommendation, I'm not scared.
Yeah, just tell them I was on your show and I recommended he give you a call, and his name's Jay Wiley. If you just run his name, they'll bring you right to the Law Enforcement Today site.
Awesome. I will do that.
All right, Steve, it's been so great to be on the show, and I wish you continued success with your podcast.
You too, Bill. Thank you so much.
Okay.